Hi, we're back again in the Forward Shop in Dunoon, and I think I must make a quick disclaimer that the Forward Shop does not endorse or support these videos. It's actually an independent kind of process, although we do use the Forward Shop because it's a nice comfy space to be in a rainy Sunday afternoon. And today we have Dave McEwan Hill. And Dave, would you introduce yourself? And
yes, Dave McEwan Hill here. Actually, been actually heavily involved with the Forward Shop since it was the Yes shop across the road, opening in 2012. Actually, we were the first Yes outfit in Argyll, in fact in Scotland. I joined the SNP in 1959 as I left school. I've been in it ever since, and in virtually every position in the SNP, bar the National Executive, it has to be said. I've been on the National Council, I've been parliamentary candidate, council candidate, and held every conceivable position at branch and constituency association level. But in the interval of 15 years, I was in West Africa and Nigeria, where I, among other things, ran a women teachers college, ran the Nigerian racecourses, ran the rugby club, blah blah. Did lots and lots of things. Actually, very interesting period of my life, and then come back to first of all to Lanarkshire, where I had a pub, and then to Dunoon, where I had a hotel, and I've had several shops and stuff as well. So I've been about a bit anyway, shall we say. But my commitment to independence has been continuous.
I was going to ask you what you did, but that kind of summarises what you actually. What are you doing currently, actually, in the Forward Shop?
Well, initially, we formed the Forward Shop 2 days or something after the 2014 referendum disappointing result. We got it running again within a month. We were in a bigger premises, and we actually set it off on the basis that there would be a rota to run it and so on and so forth. But I'm afraid the biggest problem we had was in fact the rota, and it has always been the rota. We have no problem with the generosity of our supporters. We have in fact fitted out a place here for absolutely nothing, with everything we could actually want, you know, on the generosity, and we have in fact a very comfortable bank balance. But I ended up in here all of the time, and there are other things I want to do with my life, such as write and paint and do the garden and stuff. So we're now getting that sorted out. But if anybody wants to start a Forward or a Yes shop, you won't have any difficulty funding it. You may well have difficulty keeping it open, because you've really got to pin some people down. So that's just a little warning there. But apart from that, I've been running it much of the time. I've now stepped back. There is a committee in place. It has become, in fact, a limited company under guarantee, and hopefully we go forward. Everybody's just waiting for the starting gun for the next independence referendum. That's actually what it's all about.
And the Forward Shop was on the wave of the Indie Ref back in 2014.
Yes.
And we had massive support at that point for the Forward Shop continuing.
Yeah. Well, we haven't. It's some years later, and we still have virtually all the standing orders coming in that kept the Forward Shop going. Actually, right. And we have, in fact, we do manage. It costs us £900 a month to be here, and we're still sitting at a very, very, very comfortable bank balance. And all that's required now is the starting gun to be fired, and the Forward Shop will once again become the centre of all the activity towards that, and that's what we're keeping it open for. Basically, it is an independence supporting outlet. Has been very, very useful. In fact, it's a place where people can walk in. They can join the SNP or the Greens in here. They could have joined this Labour for Independence. I think that's no defunct at the moment, but we had in fact all this kind of stuff. So this is sitting here as a facility waiting to be brought back into use again. And it's a great social centre, however, and does all kind of stuff in the evenings as well.
So do you think Scotland should be an independent country then?
What, are you asking me that?
Of course I'm asking you that.
Well, I've always believed Scotland should be an independent country since I can ever remember. I can't see. The question is not should Scotland be an independent country. The question is, why is Scotland not an independent country?
Exactly.
That's the actual question. If Scotland believes itself to be a nation, if the people of Scotland believe themselves to be Scottish, they obviously should be running themselves. That is the natural, normal, logical position of any group of people in this world, and we tend to answer the question when we should be asking the question in that one. That is my biggest bugbear at the moment. We are answering questions when we are the ones that should be putting the questions. We should be saying to the other side, to our opposition, why is Scotland not an independent country? Or even to put it into simpler terms, for instance, you're asking people, we meet some daft people, well, let's face it. Some, yes.
Okay.
The problem, of course, we face as an independence movement is that the mass of the media is controlled by the British establishment, and the people going about their daily businesses tend to understand what they read in the papers to be the truth, to be fact. And so therefore our biggest battle is battling against this. It is in fact saying to people things like, so you actually believe that the UK is hanging on to Scotland to give Scotland money? Is that what you believe, Willie? You know, or you know, do you understand that the UK is 1.8 trillion pounds in debt, and you're suggesting they're hanging on to Scotland to subsidise us? These are the questions we should be asking. We should not be answering the other questions, the questions they throw at us, the false questions about Scotland's place in the UK, in which we have figures thrown at us which actually are determined by Scotland being trapped inside a burst UK economy. You know, the fantasy deficits, which means we're paying for London Underground and London sewerage systems and so on, all this kind of stuff. Anyway, let me just bring it to a point. We should be asking the questions, not answering the questions.
Well, that actually is where I want to go to next. Is how do we actually, when Indian Rev 2 comes, how do we? What's the best way of us going through that process?
Well, the first thing we have to do, and it's critical, and until we do it, we won't win. We have to establish in the minds of our people that we are comfortably self-supporting. When we do that, we will be independent very quickly, because the last campaign, the independence referendum was lost, if it was lost, which is a caveat I would say, on the basis that we didn't persuade enough of our people that we were independently self-supporting. So we had a section of the population frightened about their pensions, about currency and all this kind of stuff. If we establish the fact that we are comfortable self-supporting, the armament of our enemy disappears completely, because their whole campaign was based on scare tactics and telling the people of Scotland that they're too poor and too small and too stupid to run themselves. If we establish and we are comfortable self-supporting, if you were to in fact compare the two economies, UK economy, Scottish economy, the only one that's actually sustainable of those two is the Scottish economy. The UK economy is overly dependent on playing with money, underproductive, underwatered, underpowered, overpopulated, overpaid in some areas, relying on 60% of food being imported and all this kind of stuff. And the Scottish economy is in fact produces enough food for itself, produces surplus electricity, produces surplus power, has surplus water, has higher manufacturing levels in the UK, higher exporting levels and so on, and the actual fact is perfectly sustainable. But the bottom line in all of us is that the determination of the UK establishments to hang on to Scotland because it needs Scotland to try and balance its books, and it ain't balancing its books, to be quite honest with you. There's a situation where the national debt in the UK is rising at nearly £2,000 a second, every second at the moment. So there will be a crunch at one point. You can continue making money, which is what they're doing, because as you make money, you devalue the money, and because the gap between the rich and the poor increases all the time when that happens, and the people who have all the money don't actually bother too much. Well, we could talk about Tories and stuff, but let's leave that at the moment. Let's just stop. There will be Tories in independent Scotland, it has to be said. They're not all bad guys.
Okay, and
that's me rabbiting on too much there. Actually.
No, actually, you're not rabbiting on at all. It's actually quite insightful. And so that's a summary of how we can tackle the opposition.
Well,
but the mechanics of it,
the basic point is we have to establish that we're economically self-supporting.
Okay.
When we do that, we can then start to paint the country we can build. We can talk about what we can do. Instead of doing at the moment what we are doing, we are trapped in a circular where the Scottish government is governing very well by standards of the rest of the UK. It in fact has not been painted as such because the media continually knocks this down. The Scottish Government and the SNP believed it could take us to independence on the back of governing Scotland, devolve Scotland well. I think what's being proved at the moment that is a very flawed assumption, because it doesn't matter how well we run this country, we ain't going to get the credit for it. So what we have to do is to take people across the bridge into saying, what would you do if we were independent? We've got to start painting our country. But the bottom line of all of this is we have to establish that we're economically self-supporting, then everything becomes possible. And it's very easy to do. You don't do it by comparing figures of the Scottish and the UK economy, or the Scottish and the North Eastern economy. You do it by looking at Scotland, looking at Norway, looking at Denmark, looking at New Zealand, looking at all the small countries, and seeing, in actual fact, in GNP and GDP, we're ahead of all these countries, but they're providing much more for their people.
Yes.
So we establish that, and then we start talking what we will do, the progressive, constructive things we will do, and we carry people across the bridge. We had an ex-MSP talking to us recently this week, and the point he made, I think, which really sunk into many people, is instead of asking at the door, do you support independence, when you go around the doors, ask folk, if Scotland was independent, what would you like to see Scotland doing? That takes them across the bridge. They then start to think, oh yeah, what would we do if we were independent? And that's what the mindset we have to establish. What would we do as an independent country? How would we do this better? But the bottom line is, we've got to take away the fear factor. We've got to remove this notion that you're not going to get your pension if we become independent, and we've got to and your currency will collapse, or the price of a stamp will be doubled, or whatever it is. I mean, I keep saying this to people. When Connolly and McDonogh and all marched into the GPO in Dublin in 1960, and they weren't wondering what the price of a stamp would be tomorrow. You know, they want to build a new country, and an Irish country. They recognised they were Irish, they were a nation, they had to run themselves, and that was enough for them. And they knew they could do it themselves. And if you look at it, it's the fastest growing economy in the world again is Irish at the moment. And if somebody says to me about their pension, I just say to them, well, that's fine, but the first thing we would do would try to match the Irish pension. And they say, what? And then you can explain to them that this notion about all this scaremongering, the UK pension is the worst pension in Europe.
It is.
You know, so, and they go, oh, right. So it's getting these little things over. We're economically self-supporting, we can do better. It's the way. It's not, oh, there's so-and-so's brought out these figures about this deficit, how do we explain that away? Well, we don't bother. We leave it alone. The deficit is an invention, and a lot of people don't understand what a deficit is. A deficit is if I was to start a shop and I spent £20,000 stocking it, that's my deficit at that point. And then I sell the stuff and I get it back. That's a deficit. It's not a debt. It's spending ahead of revenue. It's your intention to spend against your assumed revenues. The real debt we face is the £1.8 trillion UK national debt. You say 1.8 trillion to people and they think, is that more than $1 million? Or is that more than $1 billion? And you've got to explain to them, and here's how I explain it to people. If you take out a bag of pound coins and you stand them up on top of each other and you measure that, and then you multiply that by 1.8 trillion, that stack of pound coin goes to the moon and 12 times past it. That's the UK national debt. It basically is unsustainable, and it's getting bigger at £2,000 a second. So there has to be a crunch at some point. There has to be some form of reconciliation of this impossible situation, of this fantasy economy we're now living in. So basically we've got to get out. We are the only sustainable part of the UK in real terms. And of course then people will say, but we've got to look after our English brothers and sisters. Well, that's a lovely idea. Perhaps that they could look after themselves, they might be a little bit better. And it means they've got to get manufacturing and all that kind of stuff back together again. You're living in an economy dominated now by the playing about of money in the City of London. We don't need to be part of that.
We do have some really good people looking into this. Andy Anderson, for instance, has 2 books.
Yes.
And Andy has given talks in here on currency and banking and how the whole process works. We've got Colin Weir looking at it, McAlpin looking at the concepts of the Scottish Investment Bank.
Yes.
That has just been accepted by the SNP and Nicola.
Yeah.
These are crucial
That's us
aspects.
taking the step across the bridge.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
That's what I was so happy to see that
Yeah.
we are showing what we can do, not trying to make excuses for what we have no power to change at the moment in many ways. You know, I mean, the average person doesn't understand that Scotland is being charged just under £5 billion a year as interest on the UK's national debt.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that we are paying £3.5 billion for defence. We are the only nation in the world without a bloody navy. We're the only maritime nation in the world without a navy. Norway has 42 armed vessels in its waters built in Norwegian yards, and yet we're squabbling over a handful of little vessels that BAE on the Clyde. An independent Scotland would have to build its navy. You know, it would Denmark's got a huge navy. We have more coastline in Denmark, but they've got huge navy. Most of it built in Denmark, some of it made in other places. But basically, these are all countries that are parallels with us in economic performance and population. The Republic of Ireland has a standing defence force of 12,000 men, Navy, Army and Air Force, with an army that retires into favoured housing where they want to go, and we're sitting here with about 3,000 of a defence force left in Scotland, but we're paying 3 times what Ireland pays for that. So this deficit is a complete utter nonsense. You can dismantle it in a minute. We would have a deficit, as any country has, because as I explained to you earlier, it's spending in front of revenue, and every country does that except Norway. One wonders why. Of course, Norway has more money than it knows what to do with. Norway has to continually build and do stuff to stop hyperinflation hitting its economy. Norway is investing all around the world just to keep its money moving, so it's not sitting in piles of money.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder why that is. I think most of you know why that is, of course. It kept control of its oil fields. So anyway, we've got to, I'm happy to see the SNP now beginning to move over the bridge into the ideas of what we can do.
Do you think there's anyone in power within the SNP and the party in particular that still thinks that the devolutionary process, the slow movement towards an independent status, do you still think that concept's viable?
No, I don't think it ever was viable. I think
the reason I'm asking is that as I know that you and Alan Stewart back in the day when this was first muted were for this concept.
Well, no, I have always understood that progress towards independence would be gradual.
Right.
But I've never accepted gradualism as the progress towards it. What actually happens, of course, in politics, in the 1970s there was a big debate in the SNP about whether we should settle for devolution as a first step to independence. This debate went on. The party very sensibly decided, no, we push the boat out, we go for independence. Because we pushed the boat out for independence, devolution was ceded to us. Had we accepted devolution, we would have got half of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way politics works. The minute we settle for devolution, forget independence, you can slice the sausage and slice the sausage and slice the sausage. We're now at a situation, devolution-wise, for any more devolution is now becoming unsustainable in a usury state. We've gone really as far as we can go. Now talking about federalism, complete and utter nonsense. I mean, you cannot have a federal system when one part's got 55 million people and the other part's got 5. It's not fair, it doesn't work. I mean, basically, the only reason federalism would work would be if Scotland was the same as a Yorkshire, a region of England, you know, so...
Well,
am I talking too much?
No, absolutely not, Dave. No, it's no, absolutely fascinating. There are areas within the postal system that currently exist in the UK that we are North Britain, and they will not post here. The deliveries are not coming up here, especially from companies down south. So this concept of North Britain still exists within structures within the UK.
Oh yes, and you're talking about the postal system. I mean, that's one of the disgraces. Basically, the postal system, which was in fact devised as a social service, was a great thing. As soon as the postal system is in fact becomes a thing that's got to pay for itself, or becomes a business, then that goes out the window. So inevitably you will start to pay more for the Highland to get things delivered, you know, which is a huge disincentive to any form of industry or anything taking place when postal charges change. Which is why if you want to set up things in the Highlands, it's got to be something you can send in envelopes basically with the postal charge. But that'll eventually go away as well, you know. We've lost an awful lot, and it is in fact what we've faced over the last 20 years in Britain under whatever government is in fact a diminution of the idea of social services being provided as a benefit to all and so much going out to private enterprise and all the rest of it, in some kind of notion that you save money that way. In fact, you don't save money that way at all. You just destroy enterprise by what we've been doing. I've been doing that now for 20 to 30 years. And for it's quite simple when you talk about it. You know, Ravenscraig and Gartcosh, I go way back to that time campaigning for them. Those were the two best performing steel industries in Britain when they both got closed. They didn't get closed because of anti-Scottish sentiment. They get closed because it makes sense in the British context to have your industry in the triangle between Teesside, Wales and the Channel Tunnel. That's why they got closed. But the upshot of all of that was the government ends up paying more in social security payments than it ever was going to lose with the steel industry. You know, when you go back to 1917 and Lloyd George talking about how it was cheaper to subsidise a man in work than it is to subsidise him out of work. You know, so there's all this wrong thinking's been going on, and our economy in the wrong hands, and the economy in the hands of economic illiterates like Gordon Brown and people like that. You know, you know. But the thing is, a small country doesn't have these huge decisions, and also it's much more flexible. It can move very quickly. But do you actually think a Scottish independent Scot would have closed its steel industry down?
No, not at all. No.
Or closed its shipbuilding down? Of course it would not. But let's not say that was anti-Scottish. It wasn't. It made perfect sense from the British point of view to concentrate your industry down south. Well, that's their excuse anyway.
Okay.
You know, I'm talking too much, of course.
No, Dave. Don't think that at all.
Right.
I'm glad to hear your opinions on it, and
Yeah.
I think it's crucial to get this stuff down because there's quite a few people within the Forward Shop that I think have got a very valid position on Scottish independence, and have thought deeply and drilled down into the kind of kernels of how we can actually do this. So so in that regard, we do know that during the first independence referendum, that the Better Together campaign was really negative.
Yes.
And I would suggest that there was the deeper state was involved in this.
Oh, hugely.
In terms of what happened with the votes, and
Yes.
especially the postal ballot.
Yes, yes. I know that you and Andy did a lot of looking into that.
Andy especially,
I
fantastic
think it's very,
work on
very
this.
convincing.
Yes.
I mean, but it has to be put in the context of the EU deciding in 2007 that the British
postal system,
was a recipe for large-scale fraud.
and not just the EU. There was the Joseph Rowntree Foundation.
Yes,
They also
I think we saw the large-scale fraud. But however, that's neither here nor there now. We're now, and we've got to watch that. However.
The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I don't think that campaign has stopped.
No.
It has just continued.
Yes.
And I really do think that it's going to get worse if we go for a second one. I can't. That was we were. I think the Yes campaign was very positive. It was jovial. It was fun. It
came from 28% at the starting point
and got it up to 45. Yes.
Well, yes. So I mean, basically, I have serious problems with how we've performed since the referendum, because we got to a situation where I think a fortnight after that referendum we would have won a subsequent referendum, because a lot of doubters would have come over when we saw how close it was. I think that's what brought the 125,000 people into the SNP, a sudden surge into it. And I think we've actually lost that. I think we lost you lose the mojo or something? Yes.
Okay, yeah.
You know, I think we were so absolutely overwhelmed by this huge, massive number of people into the SNP that we never really, and it slid away again. But on the other hand, I do understand that in fact the position we took on the EU referendum, for instance, in fact was very, very, very carefully thought out, and was determined to provide the democratic deficit which gives the mandate for a second referendum, and that exists at the moment, no matter what happened at that general election we had. That massive electoral fraud we were in fact hit with, was it 2 months ago now, 3 months ago, because there was a huge.
You think that was a literal fraud?
Well, in moral terms, shall we say?
Okay.
There must have been several million pounds of London money pumped into that campaign.
Are you talking about campaign expenditures then?
Yes, yes.
Candidates?
Yes.
Individual campaigns?
Yes, yes, I'm talking about the fact that I received, myself and my wife here received 13 leaflets posted to us by the Liberal Democrat candidate, and the Liberal Democrats do not have two pennies to rub together in Scotland. They can't even pay the bill to the police for their last conference. But the expenditure in postal delivery from the Lib Dem candidate Argyll and Bute, I think, was probably around about £100,000.
And now get here alone?
Yes, I mean, I'm talking about £4 worth of delivery into my home, and that happened in whole areas. And the electoral expenses in Argyll and Bute is about £15,000. Now, they're getting away with that because most of the leaflets didn't say vote for Willie Smith or vote for whatever. It said no second independence referendum. It said the Social Party is this and that, but it didn't name the candidate. So there's an argument to say that any notion that over a 6-week campaign you got all these 13 leaflets and it doesn't have any effect on your campaign, of course, is utter bonkers. But they're arguing that and it's exactly the same happened in Eastern Bartonshire, where Joe Swinton is now facing examination on the same thing happening where she got in with 13 or 14 leaflets posted to all houses. Let's be quite blunt about this. There's probably half a dozen members of the Lib Dem party in Argyll and Bute. There wasn't any way they're getting that stuff delivered. It had to be by post. 4 of the postages to my house were addressed to me or my wife personally, attracting 55 pence a time, and another 9 were at 5 or 10 pence. That happened all over the place. And to say, I talked to somebody in Murray where they got 15 Tory leaflets delivered to them on this so-called snap election. Snap my butt. It was never a snap election. It was planned well in advance. And the thing about it is the Liberal Democrat and the Tory, and to an extent the Labour leaflets all said exactly the same thing. There was a huge collusion went on. There was a huge plot, a huge democratic plot against Scotland went on there.
Do you think that was to reduce the number of MPs, the SNP MPs at Westminster?
Well, it did, but also I have to say
yeah.
the SNP didn't cover itself in glory there. It can't be expected to. We went through a local election campaign where we did a holding operation, and we ended up with more councillors than anybody else and an increase in our vote and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that was, we were then going to move on to Indy Ref 2, and then along came this strange
general election. Yes.
And we produced, I think it's generally considered now. I'm not seeking to blame anybody here. This was 1-0 to the Unionists. They blew us out of the water with this one, in actual fact. We then produced a campaign which left the people of Scotland facing a binary choice. The choice for the people of Scotland were left was, are we going to have a Tory government or a Labour government in Westminster? The SNP didn't put the third choice on, which is no Westminster government for Scotland, independence. And I think we know, or those of us who have been in the SNP long enough know, that the SNP support comes out to vote for independence. But it doesn't really care who runs the buses, and it's not all that concerned about who's collecting the bins and all that kind of stuff. But they come out when you talk about independence. And I know it's not appropriate at a local election, so that we always have a slight disadvantage, but we've done very well. But it's certainly at a parliamentary election, there's no way the SNP should have entered that Westminster election without having independence. It doesn't matter whether it's Labour or Tory in Westminster, it's independence for Scotland. And they went to that election and didn't do that at all. And then they wonder why they've now been established about 250,000 SNP supporters didn't bother coming out to vote. There wasn't a huge change of votes, it's just they didn't come out. Because they had come out because of the independence campaign. That's why we got that huge thing. So perhaps we understand that now, and hopefully we understand, and we're going to the SNP conference very shortly in October, and hopefully we get some indication that we've learned a lot from that thing. Now, there are people talking about we've got to remove this one, we've got to remove that one, and all the rest of it. No, we've got a great team. I just don't think the tactic was right, but as I say, I'm not trying to blame anybody, because we were motoring along under the assumption the Labour Party vote was going to collapse and it would be left Tories against the SNP for Scotland. And of course then came Corbyn and all this kind of stuff, and that all went out the window. It indicates something perhaps we should underline. The best way to get independence is to support, is to in fact encourage people to believe in independence and not get them voting for the SNP for not necessarily that reason. there was a tactical people, Labour people voting SNP to beat Tories and all the rest of it. But of course along came a left-wing Labour person, so they all went back and voted Labour again. I'm not blaming them.
No.
But we have always got to have that other third choice on the table to get them out to vote. And we know, I've been doing this for 50 years, for God's sake. I know that running about with flags and music and all the rest of it stuff and encouraging Scottish national sentiment. We don't do well if we don't do that. That's the bottom line. And we have to do that. We will not win independence without national sentiment being central to all of that. To the fact that I'm Scottish, this is my country, I want to run it. We should be running it. And we are proud of what we can do, and we're proud of what we're going to do, and we're going to do better. That's the way it has to be. Not we'll have a democratic alliance with Labour against the Tories in Westminster, and then wonder why some people went off and voted Labour. When we implied to them voting Labour was not a bad idea. I'm not having a knock at Mr Corbyn, by the way. If I was in England, I'd probably be voting for Mr Corbyn.
Yes.
But I don't think there's. I think, well, okay, let's say 1-0 to the Unionists against the run of play. So the ball's still with us. We
have to understand that. So it's a case of that we start bringing the questions to them.
Yes.
The SNP and the
yes,
other
we ask them why we're not independent. We try and tell people what we can do when we are independent. We don't argue about all the facts and figures they throw out at the moment. They've got the books.
Yes.
You know.
They've got the press.
They've got the press. They've got the books. We can't win the argument on the grounds of we know our NHS performs better than the NHS in England. We know our trains are better than the trains in England. We know everything we do is better than happening in England. But if you read some of the newspapers in Scotland, we know our education system was judged by ONS to be the best educated country in Europe only 3 years ago. But we've been told now our education system is a shambles. Just talk to some teachers about that and they're tearing their hair out, you know, because they're working their butts off.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, in difficult circumstance. We know with continually shortened budgets we're doing awfully well. But because we don't own the press, so we've really got to move away from that and move on to what we can do. But as I say, the bottom line is if we establish in the minds of people standing out there at the bus stop that we are economically self-supporting and that we are Scottish and we could run our country better, we win. We can get dragged down all the time in all these arguments about this, that and the other and the cost of a stamp and all the rest of it, and currency, which is I think it's become a huge issue. But in actual fact our position in the currency, I believe, should always have been there is a vast number of options in currency. We will decide that when we get there. You know, the decision to share sterling was thought to be the sensible one at the moment to give a feeling of security. But of course it got attacked relentlessly and they said we couldn't do it. It wouldn't matter which particular decision we'd taken, it would have been attacked relentlessly. People would have to understand that. It's nothing to do with honesty or fact or truth.
True enough, yeah.
You know, you know. We could have said we won't share sterling but we'll use it. We could have said we will use the euro, we'd have got attacked in that too. We could have said we will use our own currency, we would have attacked relentlessly in that. So people have got to understand that this was a desperate move by the Unionists when the polls were actually showing independence starting to win. And this was their last throw of the dice, this currency thing, and that played into this fear factor. That played into the people worrying about their pensions. You know? I mean, the advertising of the campaign was pretty dark during. Oh, it was dreadful stuff. But my worries are that it's going to be worse next time round. Well, yes, but there is a situation that happens in politics, as with everything else. You start going into diminished returns when you do scaremongering, and there is already sign of that happening. I see now. I mean, there's a poll has just come out, panel-based poll, a big poll, and it shows the SNP moving up again slightly, despite being continually thrashed and not campaigning for anything. It's moved back up again. We haven't campaigned at the moment. We're sitting now at 42%. We went into the independence referendum at 28%. We're now sitting at 42%, having not campaigned. So I think they know that we're going to win the next independence referendum. They wouldn't be shouting against an independence referendum if they thought they were going to win it. They've got to put that on the table as well. They don't want another independence referendum because they know we will win it, because there is diminished returns. And bit by bit by bit, there are people now coming in here who were ambivalent at best a couple of years ago and now saying, yeah. There's a different type of person coming in. The Brexit thing is having a huge play in people. Yes, I mean, basically, look at I have nieces and nephews all across Europe.
A brother in Berlin who I just
Yes, this is not going to be an option for our young people.
He was looking at Brexit and looking at his status within Germany, and when it was explained to him that there's a firm timeline on Brexit and that it will be over within 2 years.
Yes.
Regardless of how the
yes, exactly.
The position taken by Westminster, it will be over.
Yes.
And we will be automatically out.
Yes.
And when I explained that to him, he says, "Oh my God, I think I'll take European citizenship."
Yes. I mean, you look
the
at
reason why he didn't want to lose
today.
it was because he felt Scottish, and he didn't want to lose his British passport because he felt Scottish.
I know.
Because he would feel European after
my
this.
My cousin's going for French citizenship at the moment.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
You know, you look at the Scottish Sunday Express today, and what does it say? The Sunday Express, we've got Europe on the ropes, according to.
Oh, really?
According to the Scottish Sunday Express. This is what we're up against. I call it the half-wit factor. And actually, I think what we have to do somehow or other, we have to establish with people that some of the stuff they believe is so banal as to be absolutely.
It's rhetoric.
Yeah, I know.
It's rhetoric.
It's because they've not questioned
fact.
it. You know, they don't question. They get this thing, and you've got to say, yeah, it's the argument again. So England is hanging on to Scotland to give it money. Are you absolutely stupid?
Yeah.
You know, England's hanging on to Scotland because of oil, electricity, and all the rest of it. Huge exports. I mean, a quarter of Britain's exports are from Scotland. Okay, it's nearly all whiskey
and fish.
And fish, yes, but nonetheless, we are the sustainable part of Britain. You know, and they are not, and that's why they're hanging on. So I think we have to change, a bit more aggressive perhaps, but if we can establish, as I say, I call it the half-wit factor. If we can establish that what you're believing is really stupid, but you don't go to somebody and say, "Willie, you're stupid." You go to Willie and say, "See wee Sammy over there, you know what he believes? He believes that England's hanging on to Scotland to give it money. Isn't he stupid?" And Willie will say, "Aye, it must be." And that's the way you get it through to Willie. You know, if you get the point I'm coming from. You can't call people they're stupid. You've got to establish that that's a stupid idea.
Yeah.
Why would anybody believe that?
Yeah.
And this is where momentum goes in as well. We've got to start using opinion farmers. I mean, oddly enough, your doctors and teachers in the community are opinion farmers. Oddly enough, number 3 is publicans.
Yeah.
For some odd reason.
Gang huts, essentially.
Yes, you know. So we've got to start using these people. But I think we've learned an awful lot.
Yeah.
And I have to say, bar the fact that we're not, I think we should be campaigning for independence all the time. But apart from that, I think the SNP government is doing a marvellous job in lots of ways, particularly the position on Brexit, and Nicola and Mike Russell in actual fact, working away, asking of the UK what they know they're not going to get. Putting UK up against the wall in this. Producing exactly the circumstance where we will have to say, right, we're off. You're not listening to us. We're trying to be reasonable, and I think the tactic is exactly right. I just rather wish we were doing rather a bit more, and I think we are going to do a little bit more on the Scottish national sentiment and what we can do as an independent country. But the Brexit thing has certainly given us the mandate. My worry is that the mandate runs out at the 2021 election. And that's where I would like us to be well on the road long before that.
Oh, definitely. If you push it way too far, there's something I said to Alice the last time that hope deferred makes the heart sick.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, and the other thing, of course, I mean, okay, so we can go. Referendum is our chosen way. We didn't need to go for referendum. In actual fact, the whole SNP position was a majority of SNP MPs at Westminster was a mandate for independence. But referendum is certainly the most sensible way to do it. But there are other ways you can go to independence. There's many countries right around the world have gone to independent on parliamentary votes, for instance, or on concessions from a colonial power without anything. If, for instance, the SNP was to stand down and call a general election in Scotland on the basis of this parliament assumes full sovereign power, that is the same as a referendum. That can be done. You know, that could be done.
Is that the same as a universal declaration of independence?
No, UDI is a different thing. UDI can only happen sensibly if you know you have a majority of the vote, you have the police, you have the army, you have civic government, you can rely on them. We're not at that position at the moment. If, however, now here we come to
we claim sovereign independence.
Yes. But if, however,
there's a big difference between those kinds of independence and sovereignty, and
well, I don't know if the difference is all that acute. Actually, according to the Declaration of Arbroath in 1320, the people of Scotland are sovereign. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Boom. And it's the first line of the proposed constitution.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a key factor in this.
However, law is man-made, and precedence and all the rest of it takes play in here. I have this argument with certain people in here about law. We talk about they're going to turn down a second independence referendum, and I say no, they're not. And I base that on an absolute certainty that, in fact, I have listened to Ruth Davidson saying no, she's against a second independence referendum, but she would not block it. On David Mundell 6 times when asked by Gordon Brewer would he stop a second independence referendum, and he said I didn't say that 6 times. And Mrs May saying now is not the time, which is not saying no, because she can't say no, because in the final analysis the UN Charter says that all peoples in this world, how does it go now?
Isn't that the one on colonial status though?
No. There's 2 or 3 parts to this. But Article 55, Article 73, I think it is, in the United Nations Original Declaration, allows self-determination to all peoples. The initial UN declaration, of course, was not to do with this. It was to do with trying to get a peaceful world. It was existing countries. Yeah. But they do mention in 2 occasions the absolute right of self-determination of all peoples. I mean, it's in there in black and white. This colonial thing, it was to react and deal with decolonisation going on. But the statements made are general. They cover all. They say that all peoples have the right to self-determination. By virtue of this right, they determine their political status and all the rest of it. It's in black and white there. An original signatory in the United Nations Charter is, of course, the UK, who sits on the Security Council. Now, this is what the Spanish are facing at the moment. The Catalans are calling their bluff.
Exactly.
They're going to say, there's a United Nations Charter. Are you a member of the United Nations? Right. This is perhaps a bluff.
Unfortunately for them within Spain, the Spanish Constitution.
Yes, but the United Nations Charter supersedes all law.
I understand that.
I honestly do not believe that the UK would stand in front of the whole world undemocratically refusing an independence referendum.
I think the UN also has the aspect that it doesn't get involved within a nation's domestic politics.
Yeah, but
unless it's
but it does say all peoples. All peoples.
Completely. But the problem with
well, that's where the colonial thing comes in, of course.
It does, exactly. And
yes, so, I mean, all peoples.
But the Spanish Constitution actually forbids regional referendums, which is why they're going into their offices and reading their offices right now.
I know. The Spanish Constitution, of course, was written by people.
Yes.
And laws are written by people, and laws change. If it wasn't for laws changing, we were still part of the whole Roman Empire.
And I think there's an aspect of what was taking place with was it EFA? I've forgotten who.
Yes, but I mean
the Basque separatists.
Yes, and there's the Basques. There's also there's Flanders.
Yep.
There's Venice. Looking, all around the world. I mean, I'm involved. I was involved in Nigeria, and there's the one that everybody's missing is Biafra, which would be bigger than any of these.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be 30-40 million people in a huge African state.
Oil rich.
Oil rich. Well, there in fact is
the rub.
Yes, that's exactly the Scottish situation repeated in Biafra. Nigeria doesn't want Biafra to go because all the oil's there, So that's the complication, and there's the parallel, But the bottom line is, I cannot see. But if the UK does deny a second independence referendum, we're in a different ball game. But at the moment, we play by the rules. We play the game by the rules until the rules have to be changed, or until we've got to take unilateral action. But there's no point in determining that we're going to take unilateral action before we've tried the rules first.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's where we are at the moment. I mean, I've heard people talking about UDI and all this kind of stuff, and you say that's right. So we have never. Well, there is a majority in the Scottish Parliament for independence because we've got the Greens and the SNP together. But I don't know if that actually works out as a majority vote. And of course, they were not voted on the issue of independence.
No.
So anyway, that's why the referendum is the best bet. And as you said, and as I believe, there was certainly some very, very questionable results came out of the independence referendum, the one we had, where we managed in Argyll and Bute to get a 96.7% take up on the postal vote, which is actually, in reality, impossible. And they did that in 5 places in Scotland, and nearly everywhere else was over 90%, except oddly enough, Glasgow and Dundee, where the new Yes was winning, they only came in at 75%. Here's a funny thing, they didn't fiddle with those results. That's what people have said to me, they fiddled with results at lots of other places where they could get away with it. But they weren't going to get away with it in Glasgow and Dundee, because everybody knew Glasgow and Dundee was voting yes. And it's a strange thing about Ruth Davidson and McTernan and various others talking about the postal vote. I don't think they knew anything, I think they were told to say that, to prepare us for a very odd postal vote. I think we're dealing with very clever people. And I don't think we should ever underestimate the power and the cleverness of our opposition. I think perhaps we have done a little bit of that.
I think we were relying on the hopefully working on democracy last time.
Yes.
And I think that's what made it so much fun.
Oh,
that
yes.
we believed in this process,
Yes.
and that there would be an honest, straightforward vote.
We did in fact agree as part of the protocol that we would not in fact contest the result.
Exactly.
Which
Yes.
put the party then. I happen to believe
That's the normal thing in
yes,
democracy.
but I believe that SNP headquarters entertained similar doubts about the postal ballots, but I couldn't do anything about it. But I got way back to Glenrothes by-election, which was it 12 years ago or something, and I was there for around a week, and I was never so certain in my life that we would win an election. And you know when you're in the street, you know when people are waving to you and tooting their horns, and you're putting
I felt the same way about the independence.
yeah, and you're putting their thumbs up.
Yes.
And we were staying myself and 1 or 2 people in a hostel with Labour canvassers up from the south, and they all said, "Oh, you've won it, guys! You've won it, guys!" And I know that Nicola Sturgeon went into television and STV that night under the assumption that we had won. And then I saw her after about 20 minutes looking slightly puzzled as she listened to something in her earphone to be told she hadn't won. And then we found out there was 9,000 postal votes, which there was normally about 1,800 postal votes in that seat. But we had heard that the Labour Party was going round the schemes in Glenrothes with forms already filled in and stuff like this. And then we heard that the returning officer had only checked at 1 in 6 of these, so he was supposed to check them all. And even checking only 1 in 6, he disqualified 400 or 500. So, you know, at that point, bell should have been ringing at that point. That should never ever happen again. But
yes.
as you say, the EU and the European Commission decided in 2007 the UK postal voting system is a recipe for large-scale fraud, and it's almost impossible to find it out once it's happened.
So, for the next one,
Yeah.
how are we going to count the postal ballots?
Well, I mean, I put a resolution that didn't get taken to conference last year that the Scottish Government should set up a separate body to oversee postal ballots, because at the moment it's done by the councils. And I happen to know that at the independence referendum, Argyll Duke Council was overwhelmed with applications for postal votes and didn't actually do any serious checking. I mean, this is anecdotal, but somebody told me there was a house down in Elm that had 4 postal votes of people who'd never been there for 20 years. Because eventually such was the huge surge of postal vote applications, they were all just getting passed through. So you could be inventing names and they were going on to the register.
It's a strange system, because in Northern Ireland there's a much stricter protocol
It has to be.
For postal ballots.
Yes.
I mean, it has to be countersigned if you're away studying at university, for
Yeah.
instance. You actually have to have a letter from the university to back up your case. If you're in hospital,
Yeah.
you have a doctor's signature. If you're out of the country on business, you have to have it has to be backed up by your company.
Yeah.
Whereas in UK, all it is your signature and your date of birth.
Yeah, and you go.
And that's it.
And in fact, some of the signatures are easy.
Yes.
And they sit for 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks on council computers, these applications. And anybody's got access to these computers has access to the whole system.
It's so strange that there's one for the UK democratic
Aye.
process. There's a system in Northern Ireland that completely.
There are people who have gone to jail in England for for abuse of this.
Yes.
I know it's certainly of a Glasgow constituency where in fact files went to the Procurator Fiscal, but they were never acted on because it was Glasgow. Simply that. A Labour MP went in on basically on serious worries about the postal votes, you know, but they were never acted on. The file went to the PF, but the PF didn't have enough, or it was Glasgow. Simple. Glasgow, Labour, Glasgow, you know.
So next time round, we need to watch out for the tactics from the darker, deeper bet together.
Oh, they're determined to hang on to it.
The media,
Yes.
definitely the media, the postal, the vote system itself.
Yeah.
and making sure that the Yes campaign, if and when and as it becomes, is focused on independence and independence only.
Yes, yes, indeed. I see movements going on at the moment, and there's this SIC which has been reconvened, and it reconvened actually last year. We were at a meeting up at Glasgow Green at that point. There was a meeting going on up the Carlton in Glasgow where the SIC reconvened under Elaine C. Smith. The committee's in place now. Elaine C. Smith, Pat Kane, a variety of other people on it. I think Dennis Canham has been pulled back on again. I think very shortly it's going to get back on the road again. I think it would have been back on the road again except for that strange general election.
Yeah,
you know, and it will be. It will then be possible for the Scottish Government to continue governing, which it has to do, while the SIC does the independence argument. Now we've got people in here who's shouting away about the SNP not shouting about independence all the time. But if we were shouting for independence all the time, they'd be in here shouting about why we're not doing the day job. You know, this is
the catch-22 of the whole process.
Yes, exactly.
So it's up to the activists to be at their campaigning.
It's up to us, and I know that in fact that we're sitting here in a Yes shop. There are Yes shops that are beginning to get opened right across Scotland again. There is it's bubbling away underneath there. I mean, as I say, the latest opinion poll showing us going up again, despite constant barrage and no independence campaign. We're moving up towards the mid-40s again before we have even started. And I think the powers that be know we'll win the next one, so my worry is shared by you. What will they do?
Yeah.
What will they do to stop us? You know, they will have to divide us.
I mean, know how that looks.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, I've been here for a long, long time. I've never had any doubts about the fact that the independence movement has always had in its midst plants. I've met them, I know them. Party knows some of them. Pat's always known some of them. We go the way back to Major Boothby and the Scottish Republican Army and all this kind of rubbish. We go to the young youths, the SRA, that were actually supplied with explosives by the security services to blow up post boxes and then arrested as they did so. We're talking about Adam Busby, who managed to send nail bombs to people all about Britain, but was never asked for extradition out of Dublin by the British government. And you think, well, yeah, he would have been extradited tomorrow if he wasn't on their side, you know, and this kind of stuff going on. So it's, and I'm sure we have them here. I'm sure we have them right on the party. I've been told, I was just anecdotal, but I've been told, this party knows 2 or 3. Sometimes it's easier just to leave them exactly where they are, so you can watch them. Trying to throw them out becomes a difficulty, where a huge furore then happens. But if you know this guy's not with you, then it's rather easier to deal with it than it is to actually try and get rid of him, you know. So, but we've got to be aware of all this kind of stuff. We should never underestimate the completely unscrupulous nature of our enemy.
Yes.
Nor should we underestimate the fact that they need us rather more than we need them. And that's the bottom line in all of this. And on you go with the national debt. When it gets to £2 trillion and the whole bloody thing collapses. We've got a lifeboat. We're really going to get out, you know. Before I get to 100, that is.
Well, let's hope for it, Dave.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
Listen, thanks very much, and thanks for the chat, and we'll try maybe do this again one day.
Oh, Dave, why not?
And catch up, and probably when we're independent.
Yes, yes, indeed. Oh, I enjoyed that actually.
Okay.
I enjoyed that.
Right, Dave.
So,
well, thanks very much.
Right, cheers, Alistair.